You've been quiet for too long, not because you have nothing to say, but because you've become used to swallowing your own voice. You tell yourself that you'll start living soon. Soon, when things settle. Soon, when the pressure lightens. Soon, when life becomes a bit more generous. You wait for the next Monday, the next raise, the next season, the next moment that finally feels right. But that moment keeps drifting just out of reach, like the horizon, always visible, never touchable. And while you wait, the days blur into each other. You pass through them almost on autopilot. Awake but not awakened, moving but not progressing, breathing but not really living. People say the problem is that life is short. But maybe the real problem is that you spend it in places, situations, and rhythms that steal your time without asking for it. You give it away to obligations you didn't choose, to routines that numb you, to roles that no longer fit you but continue to cling to your skin. You inherited a script: study hard, work harder, be responsible, be productive, delay joy until it becomes convenient, and endure everything, because that's what adults do. But what if that script is outdated? What if the life you're following is a blueprint created for a world that no longer exists? What if the people who taught you to wait were not wrong, but simply trapped in the same system themselves? Here's the uncomfortable question. What if the right moment never arrives? What if you never reach the magical version of your life where everything aligns, and suddenly permission appears? We act as though freedom has an expiration date. We imagine that joy is a reward waiting in some distant chapter. After the debts are paid, after the responsibilities fade, after the body weakens, and the impulse to dream becomes a nostalgic memory. But life doesn't work like that. Life gives no guarantees, and waiting for guarantees is the most subtle way of wasting the only thing you can never recover: time. Psychology offers a brutal truth. Your brain is built for threat detection, not fulfillment. It is designed to keep you safe, not to keep you whole. It prioritizes predictability, even when predictability hurts you. It favors sameness, even when sameness suffocates you. That's why routine can feel like a cocoon. Comfortable, familiar, deceptively warm. But cocoons are meant to be broken. Stay too long inside, and what once protected you becomes the thing that confines you. Many of us have learned to tolerate a low-grade ache, a persistent sense that something is missing. Not a crisis, not a fire, just a quiet erosion of self. A hum beneath the noise of daily life. A whisper that says, "Is this really it? Is this what all of this was for?" And most people ignore the whisper, or drown it in distractions, or pretend they don't hear it at all. Because acknowledging it would mean confronting the possibility that they're not living the life they want, just the life they've settled for. We've confused endurance with maturity. We've mistaken exhaustion for responsibility. We've normalized the idea that personal dreams should be postponed indefinitely, because now isn't the time. We were told that the real living comes later, after the mortgage, after the obligations, after the world finally gives us permission. But later is a mirage. Later is a myth. Later is the most efficient trap ever invented. Look around. People do not lose their spark suddenly. It happens gradually, bit by bit, compromise after compromise, silence after silence, until one day they look in the mirror and don't see a person. They see a role: the reliable worker, the stable partner, the always available parent, the dependable friend, the person who gets things done but has stopped getting themselves back. When your identity becomes a performance, when your days become a repetition, when your desires get stored for later, you eventually forget how to feel them. And then life becomes something you manage, rather than something you live. Most people don't even notice this transformation. It happens so subtly, so quietly, that they mistake the numbness for adulthood. They assume the emptiness is normal. They treat their own unmet needs as inconveniences that should be tucked away. But deep down, something inside you knows that living like this isn't sustainable, knows that a life without self-expression is just a slow internal erosion, knows that the person you've become is only a fraction of who you could be. Maybe that's why you're listening right now. Because somewhere, even if very quietly, a part of you is asking for more. A part of you is trying to break through the surface, not for a reckless escape, not for an impulsive reinvention, but for something deeper, something more human. Presence, meaning, agency, authenticity, not the unrealistic fantasy of abandoning everything and starting anew, but the simple act of reclaiming pieces of yourself that you abandoned along the way. Maybe you can't quit your job today. Maybe your responsibilities are real and heavy. But even within those constraints, you can start choosing differently. You can say no to one thing that drains you. You can say yes to something small that nourishes you. You can pause long enough to ask, "What do I want?" A question so simple that most adults never ask it honestly. You can give yourself an hour, or a moment, or a breath. And in that breath, everything can begin to shift. Because rebellion doesn't always look like breaking the system. Sometimes it simply looks like refusing to break yourself for it. The deeper revolution in a world obsessed with sacrifice is to enjoy without guilt, to rest without apology, to create without justification, to reconnect to your capacity for wonder, curiosity, pleasure, and play. The human traits adulthood quietly extracts from you without asking permission. Every day you postpone joy, you reinforce a lie. That joy must be earned or deserved or delayed until your duties have been paid in full. But joy is not the reward for living. Joy is part of living. Joy is how you remember you are alive. And here's the truth. Most people never learn until it's too late. Your life is happening now, not later, not someday, now. Not when you reach stability, not when your schedule clears, not when your path finally makes sense. Now, when things are imperfect. Now, when you are still learning. Now, while you still have energy, curiosity, questions, desires. Now, because the future is not a contract, it's an assumption. And assumptions can vanish. So stop waiting for life to announce itself. It won't. There is no signal, no green light, no perfect moment. There is only what you choose. Choose to listen when something inside you stirs. Choose to take the smallest step toward what feels true. Choose to reclaim the minutes you've allowed to slip through your fingers. Start with one moment. Just one. A moment where you stop being the character you've been performing and become the person you actually are. A moment where you remember that you are not a machine built to produce. You are a consciousness meant to experience. A moment where you let yourself breathe without asking for permission. Because what remains at the end are not the obligations you completed or the roles you played. What remains are the moments where you felt fully alive, fully present, fully you. Your story is not finished. You are allowed to rewrite chapters. You are allowed to pivot, redirect, rediscover. You are allowed to change, even after years of being told change is irresponsible. If you fail, fail honestly. Because you dared instead of because you obeyed fear. Most people never realize how asleep they've become. They drift through life in a quiet trance, repeating inherited patterns, never noticing that the cage they live in has no lock. But you noticed something, a crack, a question, an internal shift barely visible from the outside. Don't ignore it. That's your mind trying to wake up. That's your soul asking for space to breathe. That's the beginning of transformation. Life won't hand you time. You take it. You shape it. You spend it on what matters. Not someday. Not eventually. Now. Because happiness is not a place you arrive at. It's a way of moving through the world, and you can start walking that way today. Not dramatically, not perfectly, just consciously. Step by step, choice by choice, moment by moment. Your life is waiting, not in the distance, but right here in the only place it ever truly exists, the present. But before you step forward, there is one more truth you need to face, a truth even more silent, more hidden, and more dangerous than the idea of waiting for the perfect moment. It's the belief that transformation must look dramatic to be real. That change must be loud, bold, revolutionary, cinematic. That your life should turn into a montage scene. The music swelling, the scenery changing, everything suddenly aligning. But real transformation rarely announces itself. It's not a lightning strike. It's not a heroic leap. It's quieter than that, a subtle shift in direction, so small you almost miss it. A small boundary, a small decision, a small truth, spoken honestly. A small moment where you stop abandoning yourself. That's where everything begins. Not with a new life, but with a new choice. And yet, this simplicity scares people more than the idea of drastic change. Because small changes are things you can begin now. And beginning now means you no longer have an excuse. You don't need the whole map to start walking. You just need to stop pretending you're lost. The world will always give you reasons to wait. Responsibilities, expectations, fears, they stack up like walls around your dreams. But look closely. Most walls are made of paper, and you've convinced yourself they're concrete. You've been taught that certainty is safer than curiosity, that predictability is more valuable than possibility, that the unknown is dangerous, but the unknown is also where every meaningful part of your life has ever come from. Love is unknown. Growth is unknown. Discovery is unknown. Joy is unknown. Even tomorrow, a thing you depend on every day, is completely unknown. And yet, you trust tomorrow blindly, while doubting yourself constantly. What would happen if you reversed that? What would happen if you trusted your instincts as much as you trust the calendar? What would happen if you believed in your inner pull as much as you believe in your fears? What would your life look like if you stopped shrinking to fit the stories others wrote for you? This is not about throwing everything away. It's about throwing away the idea that you don't have the right to choose. You have the right to change your mind. You have the right to outgrow the life you once wanted. You have the right to want more. Not more things, but more aliveness, more meaning, more connection. And you don't need anyone's approval for that. Some people will resist your change, not because they don't want you to grow, but because your growth forces them to confront their own stagnation. Some will tell you you're unrealistic. Some will call you selfish. Some will say you're abandoning what matters. But remember, people project their cages onto others because it's painful to realize they built their own. Their reactions are not reflections of your path. They're reflections of their fear. You don't need to argue with them. You don't need to convince them. They don't have to understand for you to live authentically. You just need to keep going. And going doesn't mean rushing. It doesn't mean burning down everything in your life. It simply means refusing to betray yourself one day longer. It's choosing presence over performance, curiosity over conformity, intention over inertia, one honest moment at a time. Because small moments become habits, habits become patterns, patterns become identity, and identity becomes destiny. If you've ever wondered how people rebuild their lives, this is how. Not through one grand gesture, but through 1,000 small revolutions. A morning where you wake up and actually listen to yourself. An evening where you say no instead of yes. A decision to rest before you collapse. A conversation where you tell the truth you've avoided. a tiny spark of courage in a moment when fear expected you to stay silent. These are the real turning points. Not dramatic, not glamorous, but transformative. And once you begin, something remarkable happens. Life stops feeling like something happening to you and starts feeling like something happening with you. The weight you've been carrying quietly begins to shift. Your mind feels less like a battlefield and more like a landscape. Your days stop blurring together. You start noticing color again, in places you forgot color could exist. Because when you return to yourself, the world returns to you. And then, slowly but unmistakably, you begin to feel something you haven't felt in years. Possibility. Not the fantasy of a perfect life, but the grounded, steady knowing that your life can be different because you are different. And once you feel that, there is no going back. This is where your real life begins. Not at the end of the road, not when everything is stable, not when others approve, but right now, with the smallest step in the direction of aliveness. A shift so quiet that only you can hear it, yet powerful enough to change everything that follows.